F-18s thundering off the deck of the Abraham Lincoln, striking Iranian targets over the last 72 hours. No new strikes today, but there is a big message that was sent just yesterday, and that was that the U.S. will systematically eliminate all of Iran's nuclear power, their nuclear power plants, and their bridges being hit. We're going to break down these strike sorties, and Iran's rhetoric is at level 11. Their chief negotiator, Ghalibaf, said if you strike, you'll get hit, and the Strait of Hormuz will only open with Iranian arrangements, not American threats. But then, look at this footage. This is the control tower at Chabahar. It's one of the towers that helps determine what the origin of the ships are going through the Strait of Hormuz, and it was said Iran was using it not just for helping ships with their navigation, but actually using it to strike those ships with drones and ballistic missiles, using some of the technology in that control tower that just went bye-bye. And then the Iranian ministry is basically calling for renewed attacks because it looks like they're trying to cause drama in the Strait of Hormuz. They just had the funeral of their supreme leader, and the U.S. is stepping in kind of like dad and saying, yeah, you can go ahead and cause that drama, but you're going to get struck twice as hard. You're going to get grounded for the week to the mullahs. The mullahs have basically been put on house arrest by the Trump administration at this point. But the mullahs have a little bit something tricky up their sleeve, and that is they threatened President Trump and they threatened Air Force One. So the Secret Service made a decision. They put President Trump on the old Air Force One. That's that baby blue Boeing VC-25A, not the brand new Qatari gifted jet. Because when Iran is publicly threatening to shoot down the president's aircraft, you can't put the commander-in-chief on a jet that hasn't really been proven over the years to be able to protect everyone on board. If you think about all the different technology on that older Air Force One, sure, it's old, but it's gone through the trials, the tribulations, and it stood the test of time to protect the president. So that's why the Secret Service put President Trump on that older Air Force One, because that new bridge aircraft doesn't quite have the same military capability until we get the new Air Force Ones, which should roll out in 2028. So Iran's threatening the president's jet, but President Trump basically just gave them the big middle finger that happened to be a baby blue 747. And then we've got a global roundup section coming up, everybody, so stay around for that. We're going to cover what's going on in Ukraine. We're going to cover the latest about the unfortunate missing sailor. We're going to cover that, and then we're also going to step into the Apache pilots who were suspended, but it looks like there's a twist to that story. They did that flyover over the beach in South Carolina. We'll cover all that in the global roundup section. But now let's move into what just happened, because Iran attacked those ships. We know that started the trigger event, and CENTCOM then hit 170 plus targets. So they're striking down the ability of Iran, and they're doing it likely with F-15Es, F-35s. There's fresh photos of the F-16 CJ now on CENTCOM's X page. So that's showing us the F-16 Wild Weasel, likely a part of these strikes. But remember, Iran's deep water oceanic port on the Indian Ocean, that was the port that's called Chabahar, was hit incredibly hard. Massive strikes on Chabahar. Confirmed destroyed of the actual control tower itself. Also, marine piers hit. A railway bridge was also hit. That was in the northeast of Iran, and that's a bridge that sits on the rail corridor connecting Tehran to China and Russia through Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan. So what could be rolling in on that rail? Nothing's rolling in anymore. They might as well call it not going to roll in anymore, Stan. The IRGC confirmed. Wait, the IRGC confirmed, or actually admitting that targets got struck in Iran? Weird. They confirmed that 2 bridges were struck on the route to Mashhad. That's what connects them to Russia and to China to potentially get weapons, to potentially get things smuggled into the country that they need right now, as they're in desperate shortages of a lot of their military equipment. So they're likely using those trains to get a little gift from Russia. I'm sure it's just those Russian dolls that are being sent in. Yeah, but Iranian passenger rails between Tehran and Mashhad have all been suspended. Basically, their rail system is in disarray. The timing here, though, it does feel deliberate, right? Do you feel that? Yeah, well, it was deliberate, but the message embedded there is massive. Chabahar, the China-Russia rail corridor, and a nuclear perimeter. This isn't subtle. This is the Trump administration and Washington saying that they're no longer just hitting weapons facilities. Now, they're going to hit their ability to logistically supply their military and even power their military. Washington is dismantling every economic and strategic lifeline that that Tehran has right now. So as you guys know, there's people that are declaring victory. There's people that's saying the Iran war is a failure, and I get it. There's a deal on the table. Strait of Hormuz is open one day, closed the next. Iran's trying to cause drama, obviously. I spent close to a decade in classified vaults planning for this war, so I know what's going on underneath it all, and I know that taking command is a massive part of what's happening. The U.S. administration taking command and keeping their eye on the ball, trying to get Iran to become some sort of a normal country is not just what it looks like on the surface. Iran lost a port, a bridge, and a rail line to China in one night. It's a very rough week to be a mullah, that's to say the least. But here's how the targeting chain that executed all of this actually works. So picture yourself as an IRGC air defense commander sitting in a bunker on the Iranian coast the night of July 8th. Your radar screen lights up, contacts everywhere, multiple vectors, multiple altitudes, speeds that don't match anything in your threat library, because the US military didn't send in one platform. It basically sent a concert. Yeah, it was just a nice little Zach Top concert. Here you go, Iran. Enjoy this. The F-16CJ Wild Weasel likely went in first. The entire job is to suppress enemy air defenses, or SEAD, suppression of enemy air defenses. You're welcome, you acronym junkies. I just gave you your fix for the day. Enjoy. They hunt Iranian radar sites and SAM batteries with AGM-88 HARM missiles, high-speed anti-radiation missiles that home in on the radar missions themselves. The moment an Iranian radar operator turns his system on to look for incoming threats, he basically paints a bullseye on his own forehead. The lane gets cleared before the main package even crosses the fence. Then comes the F-15E Strike Eagles. At this point, the F-15E Strike Eagles could be loaded with the AGM-158B. That's an extended range variant that can fly off of the F-15E Strike Eagle. It is a cruise missile, a joint air-to-surface standoff missile, so it can launch from the F-15Es, it can launch from B-1s, and give standoff so you don't have to get within the threat rings immediately of whatever the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps has cooked up over the last few months. But lots of different weapons, 5,000-pound bombs, 2,000-pound bombs. The F-15E would be the platform to carry any of the bunker busters. So you, as the pilot, you're going to cue in your weapon. The weapon systems operator in the back is going to be using that targeting pod to find the exact target that you just went over in your brief prior to stepping out to the jet. And then you push that pickle button, you ripple off multiple JDAMs, you watch them explode underneath you, and then you do terrain mapping on the way home, or you stay high knowing that you're protected by F-22s and F-35s. But the F-15E is so versatile, it could dive for the deck after dropping the bombs and do an epic low level on the way home. Yeah, I highly recommend that. If you can do low level flying and you can go upside down on any flight, that's a win for me. And then the F-18 Super Hornets that flew off the USS Abraham Lincoln in the Arabian Sea. Even CNN had reporters embedded on the flight deck. They were watching jets thunder off the catapults in real time. So it's like, okay, all right, CNN, you see how amazing our military is. It's nice to see that there's some of you at CNN that actually want to tell the story of how badass the U.S. military is. That's great. Please don't be a mouthpiece for the IRGC. That's all we ask. But the B-1B Lancer, that thing can carry 24 JASMs, those joint air-to-surface standoff missiles per airframe. So you get a two-ship formation, 48 precision cruise missiles in one pass. Naval Tomahawks can also be fired from surface combatants and submarines in the Arabian Sea, and sub-launch standoff Tomahawks add to that. I mean, very versatile there. This isn't one airplane doing the job. This is a layered chain that suppresses strikes, does ISR, there's tanker support, all sequenced, all coordinated, all running simultaneously across an 800-mile combat radius. This is what full-blown American air power looks like, and this is what happens when it goes full send. So at this point, I think it's pretty clear the F-16CJ, the F-15Es, they're basically like Neo in the Matrix, dodging bullets from Iran, which are their surface-to-air missiles, and then absolutely lighting them up after they do it. But now let's talk a little bit about what Iran is actually bringing to this fight and what their claims have been, right? They have the Shahab-3 ballistic missile with ranges that are said to be up to 1,000 miles. That is a solid fuel intermediate range variant, and now they're launching these to try to saturate defenses at bases in Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar. They fired 10 ballistic missiles at Al Azraq Air Base in Jordan. That was the first launch at Jordan since June. All of them were intercepted though. So the IRGC is going to say, we hit 8 different bases in the Middle East. Well, they launched at them, but the professionalism of these unmanned aerial interceptors, the Patriot missile operators, I mean, it's nothing that Iran can hold a flame to. It probably blows their mind that all of their missiles and drones, as many as there have been shot down. And a few have squeaked through, but it's probably blowing the IRGC's mind where they're like, yeah, we just launched 15 missiles and wait, none of them got through? Wow, we really want that technology. I mean, that would be their wet dream to actually steal that technology. You made it to the global roundup, my friend, so let's talk a little bit about what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. So actually, Russia just made things a little bit more spicy, as they do. They announced that they want to expand their offensive into 2 additional Ukrainian regions and create a new buffer zone. So Moscow is probably going to push deeper, regardless of any peace framework. That's what it looks like. Overnight, though, Ukraine struck Tangarong, igniting the port and an aviation college. A drone set Russia's Ilisky oil refinery on fire, and Ukrainian drones hit Crimea again. Making Crimea basically systematically go into a blackout is the goal, and it's starting to work from what I can tell. This is part of a 4-day Sea of Azov campaign that has now hit 36 Russian Shadow Fleet tankers, which is insane. And then, unfortunately, this was released by the Navy. The U.S. Navy on Tuesday identified Commander Gabriel Edwards as the sailor lost at sea in the Persian Gulf after an MH-60S helicopter made an emergency landing in the Arabian Sea last week. Edwards was the commanding officer of Helicopter Sea Combat Squadron 5, went missing after the helicopter assigned to the USS George H.W. Bush made an emergency water landing on July 1st, according to the Navy. 3 of the helicopter's 4 crew members were successfully recovered, but the Navy suspended its search for the missing sailor on Sunday, unfortunately. So thoughts and prayers, obviously, with the family of Gabe. And then the commander of the strike group released this quote. He said, "The thoughts and prayers of every member of the Carrier Strike Group 10 team are with the Edwards family." He said, "While we are far from home, our heartfelt support remains at your side." He continued, "Gabe's legacy as a husband, father, friend, and fearless leader will never be forgotten. We are thankful to each who carry a unique and indelible part of Gabe's memory with us as we continue this important mission. Thoughts and prayers with Gabe's family. Hats off to a true American hero." And then it looks like the U.S. Army tried to suspend the Apache pilots that did this low flyby at a beach in South Carolina, and I have a few thoughts on it. And then Secretary of War Pete Hegseth actually just said that their suspensions have been removed. So I have a few thoughts on this because I think there's a buffer zone, right? What they did was flying extremely low, and it was awesome. It looked incredible. Now, there's a limit to this, right? Because when you're trained to fly at air shows, you're trained to fly extremely low. That's one thing. Like the Apaches, they are trained to fly extremely low. So what are they doing? Well, I would look at it from the perspective of, are they trying to do something weird like flying in formation really low? Because they might not be trained for that. But if they're just flying low and they're offset from the people that are out swimming, this just becomes an epic recruiting video. So for me as a commander, I would say, hey, just remember there's a limit, but that was also epic. And just remember the limits are there for safety. So promise me that you won't go past your comfort level and you won't do anything that's unsafe for yourself or anybody on the ground or your flight mates. And if they came back and said, hey, sir, we had thought about this, we had made this a part of our decision making, I'd be like, cool, nice job. You probably just recruited 1,000 members for Army Aviation. And that brings us to the 40 chess strategic analysis section, my friends, because what's going on here is massive. Bridges, power plants not being struck, but basically no uncertain message being sent and saying, hey, Iran, you're going to find out if you keep going down this route of trying to cause drama. Iran's strategy theory of this entire war has basically been a 3-legged bar stool. Leg 1, control the Strait of Hormuz and use it as negotiating leverage. Leg 2, route oil and trade through Chabahar as the economic bypass that keeps the regime funded while talks drag out. And then leg 3, keep the rail corridor to China and Russia open so sanctions pressure stays manageable. But in a single 48-hour strike package, the U.S. military has kicked out the legs of that bar stool. The Chabahar strike, not only tactical, it's strategic surgery, teamed up, taking out their rail capacity to get supplies for their military from Russia and China. That rail line runs through Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan, and this is the physical thread connecting the Iranian economy to Chinese and Russian supply chains. So what do you guys think happens next? Do you think more bridges and power plants will be hit?